the psychology of this. Like I like talking about capitalism to some extent. I don't fully love capitalism, but we discuss this a lot when we're talking about like systems within our society that are like working or not working. And so there is a psychology of capitalism because some people just feel it's this culture that we exist in.
Yeah.
But like any culture we exist in, it's impossible for us to exist within it and not impact us in a huge way, especially the way capitalism does, right? So with capitalism, it's not just about like making money, profit. We know in essence that's a lot of it. But it actually becomes pretty deep-rooted within our culture, but within us too. So, and you kind of alluded to some of this. It impacts almost everything. Our identity, right? Our identity tied to work. Our underlying beliefs, cognitive processes, and our behavioral patterns too, right? So capitalism almost wants us to be these well-oiled machines where we're just productive and repeat and do it again. And that almost becomes ingrained in our own view of like, we also view ourselves as these like productive machines, almost disconnecting ourselves from like the human aspect.
I see. I see that.
Right? Yeah. And that's why so many of us attach our worth to productivity, because capitalism tells us indirectly or directly that the more we can produce and the more we do and the more we achieve, the worthier you are in our society. But it's just not how our self-worth works on an emotional level. But within this capitalistic society, a lot of us don't believe that, right? A lot of us very much believe that the more I do, the more I achieve, the more successful and worthy that I am. And that's all just stemming from this system that we're in, which is capitalism in America.
You know, when you said something that like really struck a chord with me, it was like being like a machine, you know what I mean? And not being connected to what it's actually like being human and how something affects you, like your emotions, your physical experiences, your thoughts. And it makes me think about like, it kind of like was like it hit me like a hit dog bird. Like it hit me because like a lot of times in the past when I used to schedule things, I went by a calendar. I had to go by a calendar, but I was scheduling things and like it fit in terms of the time, but I wasn't attending to the physical and emotional toll that some activity or sets of activities would take and the amount of energy that it required, and that it might be really difficult to do all of this stuff back to back to back the whole day, you know, like, and I used to work from sun up to like sometimes 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night. And then I'm back up it again. And I'm moving from one thing to the next. And so it just makes me think about like, that probably was what was maybe working in me to maybe believe that like, well, I fit it in my schedule, but we are human. And so just because something fits in your schedule doesn't mean that you should schedule it all.
Yeah, definitely. Right. Yeah, that's interesting because it almost reminds me of how I would schedule, and I'm sure a lot of therapists still do this, but how they schedule their clients, right? Like, and not till you started saying that, I'm like, okay, I'm even making excuses for myself because I feel, you know, back in the day, I could schedule 7 clients in a row.
Come on.
And like, okay, it's fine. It's a little tiring, and obviously I've had to adjust my schedule a lot over the years. Like I can't work 5 days in a row seeing clients. Now I have to stagger days. Now I can't schedule 7 in a row, maybe in a day, but I need a break in between there. And I've just attributed it to like my values changing, or I still like the work that I do, but it's just different now. Right? Maybe because I'm not counting on those hours anymore, so it's less motivating. Or I'll just say, like, I'm getting older now, so I need more time. But with you actually saying that, it's actually the thought of, I think I just needed to name that I'm actually getting burnt out. Yeah. And if I continue that pattern of thinking I can do 7 clients in a row, I will be to that burnout stage. Because it's a lot, right? A lot of people just think, oh, you're just sitting there talking to people. No. That's not all it is. It's a lot emotionally, a lot we're taking in. But I know some therapists who can schedule 8 in a row. One lady used to do like 12 clients a day. How? I don't know. But I'm like, couldn't be me.
I'm stunned.
Yeah.
And I'm probably on the lower end. Like I'm like now I realize like I can only do 3 back to back. That is my cap. Maybe 4, and that is pushing it for me. And I don't even really go more than 3 or 4 in a day. I mean, I do therapy part time, so it's not like it's my full time thing, but that feels like honestly a full day's worth of work for me. Also less than what I did in the past, but I also started to have to learn. And some of it came from like trial and error where like I'm working like I used to work, and then I'm like, I would start to punt out, or when I was pregnant and I was doing that, I was getting sick. I got sick in a session one time, like physically ill. And I realized like, oh, this is a different phase of my life. Like, you know, my body is shifting. This is pregnancy. It clearly is different than I ever thought it was. And now my body can't do that. And during pregnancy, it was to the point where I could only do 2 in a row. Like I could not, if I did 3, girl, you might get sick on the third one. So it's just, I think a part of it is wisdom, but also maybe age and also just like time, the amount of time that you spend grinding. I think ultimately it's cumulative, like it'll catch up. So maybe it's working right now, but I think all of that catches up. Like your body does keep the score, and it will tell you eventually, and it will shut you down unless you are proactive or at least start to listen to the cues.
Yeah, no, definitely. And again, it's difficult when you think about the psychology of capitalism, right? Capitalism, and it's still a piece of our survival, will tell us, no, schedule that extra client, right? Work that overtime, right? Work that extra hour. That's extra money, which is like, yeah, it is. And a lot of us really need that extra. But that's when we have to start balancing, like, at what cost, right, is our well-being. Capitalism tells us there's no cost to our well-being. Like you can push it and push it and push it. Well-being is like on the bottom of your priority. And that's where this balance with the soft life era is. It doesn't have to be completely opposite, but soft life era tries to be that little voice to tell you like your well-being actually needs to come first
in order for you to actually survive in your health. And it makes me think like when we talk about like capitalism, like doesn't require it. You know, I think about to whom is it serving? You know, like I presume it serves at the end of the day only but so few. And so it may not matter to the system, to the organization, but it will matter to you as the individual if you continually work in this way. And so I think that, you know, I get this is the life that we live, and, you know, we deal with the cards that we're dealt. And at the same time, I think as we're dealing with that, at least I've come to a place where embracing some of that softness is truly important. And I think ultimately it could be even important for people's dollars in the end.
No, yeah, definitely. Right? It's less about the short term. And more almost a self-preservation.
Self-preservation. Absolutely.
So I know you have, because the opposite of this self-preservation is gearing to burnout, right? And so I know you have kind of some stats on burnout and what that is.
Don't you have a definition you wanted to share with them? You want to start with that?
Okay. So from the World Health Organization, burnout is a syndrome resulting from workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. It's characterized by 3 dimensions: feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion, increased mental distance from one's job, or feelings of negativism or cynicism related to one's job. And I know like burnout is specifically related to like work or job, but I do want to normalize and highlight like a lot of people just get burnt out from role overload, right? I think of like stay-at-home moms or stay-at-home dads, like people don't label that as like a job at work, but it is work, right? And so it's still possible to feel this sense of burnout outside of like work and job. But if we're being literal, right, burnout was coined from like the workplace and job.
So this study was from APA in 2021 and did like a work and well-being study. It's a couple years old, but I think if you did a study now, you probably would find similar things. Maybe not, I'm not sure. And I will acknowledge that some of this maybe was related to the COVID era, this 2021 survey. But at that time, 79% of employees who filled out that survey had said that they experienced work-related stress the month before. Nearly 3 in 5 employees reported negative impacts of work-related stress, which includes like having lack of interest in the work that they're doing, feeling less motivated and having less energy. 26% of people said that. 19% said they had a lack of effort at work. And 36% reported like this weariness cognitively. 32% reported emotional exhaustion, and 44% reported physical fatigue. And that those stats were actually an increase from 2019 to 2019. It was only 38%. So to me, that's pretty startling. If more than half of people are like indicating that they feel work-related stress, at least before. And just the kinds of experiences that they're having, like lack of energy, exhaustion, not having motivation, not having interest in the work that you're doing. Like, this is huge. And I think it's also huge for like just, work and productivity. We think about, I believe the number one disability in the world is actually depression.
Okay.
Catch that stat, but I think that is, at least it was at the time. I mean, when I looked this up a couple of years ago, I think that is really important to think about, because how you work and how much you're working and how it affects you, whether it be burnout, whether it be physical exhaustion and fatigue, whether it be depression or anxiety, like these things can actually be debilitating.
Yeah, literally.
Another thing that was quite like concerning is that like this other study was looking at what happens when American employees like actually like take a vacation or take some time off of work. Ciao. Instead of feeling renewed, you know what I mean? So you go on vacation and afterwards, like, how do you feel? You should feel like renewed and great, right? 50% of employees report that time off work leaves them feeling drained, and for at least a week upon their return to work. So 42% of Americans dread returning to work after having a break. 41% said that they had post-time off burnout. 14% said they make mistakes due to exhaustion. I mean, there's a lot more, but none of it is good. So I think that there are some dire effects of overworking, and it can come out and affect you and society in so many different ways. So the physical, like the personal effects, maybe burnout. It could be depression, anxiety. I think that maybe has to play in there, just the experience of stress. But also when you talk about like making mistakes at work, not having interest or motivation in your work, then we're talking about it also affects the work environment and affects the other people around you. So I think it's something for all of us to look at.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, it is like drastic stats, and really just highlights the fact that a lot of us in society, just don't have enough recovery time in general. And then once you do get that recovery time, it's short, it's not that long,
right?
But then you're still coming back to chaos almost, right? Where it's like still having to catch up on emails and all this stuff. So it's difficult. And that's why I'm always discussing this with clients, and it kind of taps into like, how do we incorporate self-care? Easier said than done, because again, a lot of us are just on this survival mode. But I'm always trying to preach, like, we have to try to create a life somehow. It doesn't have to be a huge way. But we have to create a life somehow that, like, we don't need a vacation from. Like, vacation can't be the only recovery period, because those stats really show that, like, vacation's nice, but sometimes it's more stressful because you're like getting behind on work.
Or just not enough.
Yeah.
It's not enough to take a week off of a job that's stressing you all year.
Yeah.
It's not enough recovery time.
Exactly, right? You go to paradise and come back to this chaos. Like, who's that? What happiness is that going to lead to long term? And so how do you create a life where you're not feeling like the vacation is your only time for recovery? Right? So, and so I'm sure a lot of those stats probably resonate with a lot of listeners who are like, yep, I'm in that bunch that's dreading going to work. Right? I have too. So I do have a checklist, and I'm just going to read through it. And this checklist is kind of like a burnout checklist. And so as you're hearing these things,
I'm going to take it. I'm ready. I'm taking it.
Listeners, can really start just taking note of like, yep, that one. If I get through the whole list and you say, I resonate with all of those, yeah, let's have a conversation about burn, because that means you're at a high level of burnout. So I'll read through some of these. So a compulsion to prove yourself or being overly ambitious, working harder than usual, neglecting your own needs, finding that you don't have time for needs not related to work, increasingly denying the problem. It's kind of, people like that cartoon where this cartoon's in like this flame of fire in the house.
Like,
I'm like, everything's fine. Everything's fine.
Okay, yeah.
So denying the problem, withdrawing, lacking direction, or feeling cynical.
Yeah.
Changes to your behaviors and mental reactions. Depersonalization, which pretty much means a loss of contact with self and your own needs. Avoiding work, or maybe you arrive to work late, but on purpose. A lot of us just arrive to work late, but like literally it's a strategy because you don't want to go to work. Signs of exhaustion, apathy, negativity. Maybe you feel less patience and less empathy towards others. You may be engaging in self-medicating or numbing emotions or practices like using alcohol, drug use, shopping for some of us. Yeah, sweet is a good one. Yes, sweet. And this one, or excessive social media.
Oh, yeah. And that shopping is one. I see people do that a lot.
Yeah, for real. And then this last one, you mentioned like depression or anxiety. Sleep issues is huge.
Yeah.
And it's difficult. I'm always assessing sleep because sleep will tell you a ton about your body and self. But sometimes it's difficult. So a lot of people do just suffer from like insomnia and stuff. So they don't know the difference when their sleep is altered. But if you're starting to have sleep issues, and even if you do have sleep issues now, there's usually some like root to it, right? And so those are some of those common signs of burnout. I think it's normal. Most of us probably have a couple or a few of these, right? But if you feel like, okay, 80% of those, I feel I resonate with that, it's time to do a little check-in with self.
Yeah. I think, it feels good to not be in that place anymore, but I can recall, like, it's interesting, like, since I met you, this was like a huge career shift for me. Mm-hmm. And it was because I was burnt out. Like, just a lot of those things you said, that's how I felt last year. And, I made a decision, like, I think this is kind of my softcore era, although I'm still like working hard. But, not in the way that I was last year. And I can say that having experienced, burnout, I think it also even affects like how you think. And like that one time, like all you can think about is work. Like I can, like now coming to, like I call it like I'm feeling sober now in the sense of like my mind was so wrapped up into the job that I had before and also trying to hustle it. And I had other jobs, but also the job that I had was just so toxic and stressful in addition to doing other jobs that I loved. But like all of that was too much. And I was so like foggy in the brain, and that now I feel sober from all of that, and I'm thinking about all the things that I like just missed out on or didn't have time for, or kind of also like left undone, like important life stuff, because I was grinding in a toxic work environment, which is a different episode, way too much.
Yeah. But it speaks to that impact of burnout, right?
Yeah.
It's not just this one-dimensional thing where it's like, okay, it's going to impact our relationship with work and dreading work. Like, it's going to impact your sense of self. It's going to impact your relationships, right? 100%. This checklist was like less patience with others, empathy. It's going to impact sleep. And so all these impacts that it has on an emotional, literally a biological level too, right? Increasing that stress. And huge mental health issues stem from burnout too. So, yeah. This culture, I mean, hopefully the biggest takeaway with some of the psychology of like capitalism, burnout, and the impacts is just we're very much in a culture, unfortunately, where like this stuff can literally kill us. Like if you think about all the diseases that we suffer from in America, a lot of them are like these stress-related diseases and stuff. And so within this capitalistic society, the way that we're going to operate is killing our bodies, right? So how can we tap into more self-preservation? Still within the context that, like, yeah, we got to survive. Survival is necessary. But how do I survive and preserve myself? And that's probably not an easy question for people to answer. Yeah. Another impact is our authenticity, where I don't think we like think about the impacts enough.
That is big.
So yeah, I mean, it's interesting, even the example you gave of like how you felt this last year, you just feel like sober now almost, right? Anything come to mind when you think about almost being outside yourself, that depersonalization, right? If you're not attuned to your own needs anymore, how are we going to be in tune to our authenticity?
I think it's really hard to be your authentic self when you're like burnt out, you know, and when you're grinding so much that it affects you in that way. Like, I think just maybe grinding, generally speaking, you know, to some degree, it's fine. Maybe that's a part of, you know, something that's important to you. But once it reaches like this negative effect of like burnout from personal experiences, and then also from, you know, having the privilege of sitting across the couch from other people, from clients, and seeing in personal relationships as well. When I see people who are burnt out, I don't see them being their authentic self in that moment. And I think a part of the suffering is from them also not being like who they genuinely are. I think it changes folks, or it just doesn't allow you to kind of tap into your full self. And so for me, and I can speak for myself, that last year I could not tap into my full self. I was not my full self. And this whole year that I've had, you know, the year that I've known you, given our context, it has been so much better because I am, you know, refinding myself. And there are other things that impacted that. I think motherhood in many ways affected myself. But like, I'm able to be my authentic self in this space now. And that feels really good in a way that I wasn't able to be previously.
Yeah, that's huge. And like you said, there's literally like no room for our authenticity. One, in this culture at times, but two, when we're on that verge of like burnout. Right?
Yeah.
It's all about survival. And when we're too much in survival mode, it's almost like our authenticity in ourselves takes a back seat. Any passions we have, it's like, forget it, we don't have time. The sense of play that we talk about a lot. Who has time for play? I'm trying to survive. So a lot of these things that our authentic self would be drawn to in that survival burnout phase, you just don't have time for that. And you're disconnected from self.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it, sometimes like you're in this protective mode, even too, like when you're surviving, that's also like a sense of protection. And so like, how can you, like when you're in protection mode, you're protecting the things that are most important and sensitive and precious. And usually that's our authentic selves. When I think about like the soft life, or some of the things that it stands for, which is like wellness and taking care of yourself. I think even luxuriating, you know, like that's where I see parts of yourself are allowed to come out that can't come out when you're protecting yourself and you're surviving. And I think those parts are a part of our authentic selves. And so I do think that there is something about like the soft life that allows people to bring out their authentic selves because things are okay, you know, things are calm. And a part of that may be like how you're able to bring out some of the soft life, even if the context isn't completely or all the way 100% changed. Sometimes you do need to change the context. And in my case, I had to change the context 100% and figure out a way to make it work. And that also helped me to kind of bring out some of the softness that I'm still working towards and balancing. But, you know, I think that some softness allows folks to be authentic.
Yeah, it definitely makes room for that. And the biggest thing, too, as you mentioned earlier, just the soft life sets us up for living with intention.
Yeah.
Right? And so with that intention, it reminds us that despite, like you said, this context of sometimes having to like hustle and grind and survive, this intention is going to remind me that like, what does my authentic self actually need right now within this context? But when we're solely in just the survival grind, we're not even thinking about what the self needs.
Yeah. And like, for example, when I think about intentionality and like what some softness can bring, it's like, I just told you now I'm like in this boot camp, and that's not actually easy per se.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I have to wake up at 5 something in the morning, be there at 6 a.m. Who wants to do that? And it's actually physically hard.
Yeah.
But I think that being in this era that I'm in right now and really trying to find and craft and be intentional about balance, that I do it and then I ultimately feel good. Like, I think it has such a positive effect on me, but I have to be intentional about doing something that's actually very hard.
Mm-hmm.
Something that I could not do when I was in my grind phase, my only grind phase, when I was only in that grinding mode. Like, I couldn't get up at 5 something in the morning and go exercise at 6 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
No way.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not possible. It wasn't possible for me in that mindset.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah. And before we wrap up, there's a lot more we can discuss, but even with this piece, I'll add, there's probably a lot we can discuss, but I do just want to name it and normalize, because I think when this conversation comes up too, and we tie in authenticity, a lot of people get the impression too that like our authentic self requires us to be engaged in like authentic work when we're thinking about like jobs and stuff. And that's a common thing we hear in society, like, find your passion and make money from it. Sounds good, people. It sounds good. And I feel we're probably doing some of our passion, so that's like a blessing to be able to do that. But in this, again, capitalistic society, inflation, a lot of us, we need to survive. We have families to feed. Sometimes our passions just can't be what helps us to survive. And that's okay.
100%.
But I think our society gives the message of like, you're not living authentically if you're not even pursuing that passion.
Yeah, or like your purpose, like your job has to be your purpose.
Yeah, definitely. And so both things can be true. Yes, it's great if you can have a passion and make money from it. But a lot of us, even your stats alluded to, a lot of certain jobs that you just don't like. That's just a normal American thing. But are you able to still incorporate some of your authentic passions outside of work? And that's where that intention comes in. Because again, people are like, with what time am I doing this on the side? But that's where this intention comes in of like, you need that. That can be some of your like rejuvenation, recovery time. It's actually still engaging in some of your passion things, even if that's not what's making you money.
It makes you think about like in the time that you're, well, two things. One is in the time that you're in your job, even if you don't like it, are there things that like can you still bring yourself to the job?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you can't though, because some people you actually can. It's not a safe place to do that. But what about your life outside your job? And are there ways for you to be intentional about really doing things that are enjoyable or that help you feel good or that build you up outside of there so that at least the whole 24 hours of your day isn't feeling so bad?
Yeah.
And the last thing I want to say, because what you said reminded me, is that because I used to be very much like, you know, I think people need to like live their purpose through their job. I was very much in that mindset. And it wasn't actually until a couple of years ago when I was in a very stressful job. And I had a boss that I actually felt really close to. And my boss, like, I felt like looked out for me. And I think I was struggling with the job and wondering, like, should I go? And his advice was actually very helpful. He was like, you know, well, some people have jobs and they just like have the job because they need the money. Mm-hmm. Some people have jobs because it is flexible. You know, and some people have a job because they love it. Like people have different reasons for having a job. And so like, basically, I think his response was like, it's okay if you need this job and you can't walk away from it because the reason why you have the job may not be the passion or may not be the desire. It may be for other reasons that are totally valid and necessary forever or for this time in your life. And I think what that did for me was, I think it opened my mindset to that. And also, I think it freed me from like trying to feel like I had to make it work in that moment and, you know, and to allow my life to flow. And since then, you know, years have passed and my life has flowed to now. And it's, you know, I'm in a much better place.
Yeah, definitely. I like that. Right? Yeah, the authenticity. may not always align with the work, but it's more so aligned with like our intention behind the work and with how we live too.
Thanks for tapping in to All Things Authentic. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. For full episodes, find All Things Authentic on your favorite podcast listening platform.